Speaker, and I rise today to speak to the matter of public importance submitted by the member for Lowan. The member for Lowan has proven once again why those opposite are seated where they are. They are completely incapable of understanding their portfolios and are completely unqualified to govern. The Shadow Minister for Mental Health should know that this issue is a health issue and demands a health response. Deputy Speaker, those on the other side make no sense on this issue. They are desperate to try to show an inkling of some relevance to get a headline in the Herald Sun. They will stop at nothing in their fear-mongering. They are happy to rubbish Melbourne and Richmond and spread headlines like Junkie Town. They pretend they don't want to damage businesses in the CBD in Richmond, but they are, every day, trashing these same areas. Deputy Speaker, that is their MO, fear tactics. They tried fear-mongering at the last election and disparaged our African and multicultural communities. And that didn't work. And yet here they are again, same game plan, crossing their fingers and hoping that it will work this time. They tried this scare campaign in 2018 against the member for Richmond, the Minister for Planning. They tried to scare the Richmond community about the medically supervised injecting route, drumming up fear and loathing, but those opposite didn't even put up a candidate for Richmond in 2018. That's how incompetent they are. They've tried to pretend that they care about the people of Richmond, and yet they can't even be bothered to attempt to represent them. They couldn't even drag out a young Liberal from their university studies to be on a ballot paper for a couple of weeks. Now they are pretending to represent the people of Melbourne.
Member for Melton. Deputy Speaker. Member for Brighton.
Clown reading of dot points has nothing to do with the MPI before the Parliament.
That is not a point of order. Member for Melton.
Must have hit a nerve, did I? Hey? If my memory serves me right, they weren't going to put a candidate up for Melbourne either until the very last minute. They were proudly announcing that they weren't going to run in Melbourne and waited for the final day to put the paperwork in.
Member for Melton. Member for Brighton.
Acting Speaker, in no way is this relevant to the MPI. I know that the member is reading directly from the notes. However, this has no relevance to the MPI.
On the point of order, Minister.
Speaker, you previously Mr. Brighton strayed far and wide, so I think there is a sort of an understanding when we're talking about bills like this that you can travel far and wide, and that was undertaken previously before by the Prime Member.
Order. Order. I wasn't in the chair for the previous speakers. I do ask members to speak to the MPI. At this point, I don't think the member for Melton has strayed too far, but I do ask him to speak to the MPI.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Those opposite give zero thought about the people of Melbourne. This is just once again dog whistling and scare tactics. Isn't it telling that they give zero effort to the people in Melbourne and Richmond in the 2018 election, and now they pretend they suddenly care? They have no plan to govern and no plan to deal with health. They are unfit as an alternative. Have we heard from those opposite about how we can reduce drug use in the community? No, just fear. Have we heard how they can reduce the pressure on ambulance and emergency workers? No, just fear. Have we heard how they can help the families that surround drug users? No, just fear. They are incapable of delivering health policy. They are incapable of good fiscal policy. Deputy Speaker, the only thing that they are capable of is fear-mongering and leadership spills, and they didn't even get that right. So once again, it is this side of the House that has to educate those opposite about what real leadership is, what a real health response is. They are completely incompetent in how to deal with a health issue. I feel some need to educate them. Drug use is a health issue. They try to spin it as a law and order issue because that's what their focus groups were paid to say. But people taking drugs is a health issue. When it comes to injecting drug use, which the MSIR was created for, then primarily we are talking about heroin use. Other drugs are sometimes injected. However, the research shows that this is usually only when supply of heroin is disrupted or temporarily priced higher. Heroin is not a drug that people just walk around and decide one day, oh, gee, I'll give that a go. No user is going to a party deciding that they might try a little bit of an injection in the arm. Heroin users are at the complex end of drug usage. There has been a ton of scaremongering about heroin users, but many fail to understand that a person to use an injecting drug, that they have often come on a long health journey. There is no typical user. Injecting drug users have come from all walks of life. The majority of injecting drug users have complex issues going on in their lives. It might surprise those here that many of these users are using heroin as pain management, for either physical or mental pain management. There are a significant proportion of heroin users who were patients that had been on legally prescribed pharmaceutical drugs, primarily opioids, for complex health needs. Many are members of our community who have had excruciating injuries or workplace accidents. They have been treated for pain with strong prescription medication. Many of these users haven't been able to shake off their addiction for these legally prescribed pharmaceuticals. At some point, the risk and difficulty of obtaining pharmaceutical opioids to feed their addiction is not practical, and they find it easy to try closer alternatives, and that's heroin. The member for Lowen has had a career in health administration, but somehow thinks that people who have become addicted to opioids through traumatic injuries should be locked up and throw away the key, rather than have access to services that deal with their addiction and help access services that can reintegrate them into society. Once an opioid addiction has taken hold of someone, the grip on their lives are strong. What the member for Lowen and those opposite don't seem to understand is that these users are addicted and are using drugs whether or not at an injecting room, whether it's available or not. They are using because they need to, because their addiction is controlling their health. Drug users who were once highly functioning in society often feel shame about their drug use. Often it is hidden from their family, their friends, their work colleagues. This, of course, means that they are using it secretly. For highly functioning drug users in Melbourne CBD and in the inner city, the users have come from surrounding suburbs as well as those living in the city. Sometimes they have come from Kew, sometimes from Malvern or Caulfield or Brighton. It's not restricted to the inner city. It's not restricted to the western suburbs. It comes from all suburbs. It comes from all suburbs. Research tells us that most heroin is used within 10 minutes of being purchased. When those opposites say they don't want drug use in a particular location, they fail to understand that that drug use is already happening, as it was in Richmond. And guess what? If there isn't a safe place to inject, it in secret, down alleyways and unoccupied buildings, in cars or in quiet public buildings and facilities, an injecting room is a safe place. Drug use is happening now, and it was happening on the streets of Richmond prior to the medical supervised injecting room. And in the year prior to it opening, it's my understanding that there were 35 deaths in the streets that ambulance paramedics responded to. There's not been one death in the injecting room since it's been open, and that's what will happen within the CBD, and that is it will protect drug users from dying from overdose. And I don't know if anyone's ever experienced attending to a drug user that's overdosed, but I have on many occasions. And I can assure you that drug users do not access health services when they have overdosed, because they're given a shot of Narcan, they will sit up and they will be aggressive towards you and they will take off. If you can convince them to go to hospital, they'll do the same at the hospital. The hospital staff will administer Narcan and they will sit bolt upright and then charge out of the hospital and not seek health services. At least in an injecting room, they go there under their own steam to inject, and they are supported and supervised, and offered health services, and a number of them take up the health services. If we're just going to let them inject in the street without any supervision, they will never take up health services. The use of these facilities are recommended by the coroner. They are supported by paramedics, the fire services, the nurses, healthcare professionals, social workers and non-government organisations. It's an Andrews government that made the tough choices that have the best outcomes to treat this health issue and find solutions to this problem. I only wish those opposite took their own portfolio seriously and see the social, economic, health advantages that their colleagues in New South Wales and the Andrews Labor government are prepared to make. Thank you.